Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video review, we take a look at the Fitbit Sense, Fitbit's latest flagship smartwatch that doesn't just focus on exercise, but also on your health. Of all the products that Fitbit launched in 2020, the Sense is probably the most ambitious. And it's got all kinds of sensory technology inside of it, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to kind of go through it one at a time. So let's start with the design first. So if this looks a lot like the Versa 2, that seems to be just fitting with Fitbit's design philosophy. And so the same squarish design applies here. It's a very nice 1.58-inch AMOLED display. It's pretty bright. I don't know about if it's as responsive. I'm kind of on the fence about that, but in any case, it's a nice looking watch, and it's got some things that are different. So it's a nice design. You got a speaker built in now, so not only does it have a mic, it also has a speaker as well, which I'll get to in a second, later on as to what you can do with that. But it's really what's under the hood that I think is what makes a huge difference here. So let's start with the new Eda Sensor. So this is the electrodermal activity sensor, which basically measures stress by pulsing your skin with these very tiny electrical charges. You don't actually feel them, to measure how much sweat you're producing. And by doing that, it sort of tries to figure out, okay, are you calm? Are you not? And it's all manual, right? So you basically have to cover the whole display, including the frame, with your hand for 2 minutes in order to get there. Now, when you finally get the result, you also have to, you don't have to, but you could put in how you were feeling at the time. Like, what kind of mood were you in? Were you relaxed? Were you not? So, and then from there, it gives you a score, which then becomes part of more empirical data in the app that I'll get to later. Basically, the concept is interesting because it's supposed to sort of see, like, okay, how are you feeling? What's your heart rate at? Most of the time when you're doing this for 2 minutes, you're actually calming down, so your heart rate starts to drop. That's quite normal, and it happened every time that I used it. The data unto itself is hard to really gauge because you're doing it manually all the time. So you almost have to do this when you're relaxed and when you're not relaxed to get some kind of an accurate sort of balance as to what it is. And right now, who knows what that would be? Like, you'd have to be aware of doing it all the time. So I would have liked if it was a little bit more automatic in that regard. So it's like taking, just if you're like not moving a lot, it could just take a reading and go from there. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's manual. So if you get into it, you can take multiple readings in a day and you're fine, or you can just take one per day and then go from there. Now, the next thing is also applicable because we have a skin temperature sensor in here too. It's doing this while you're sleeping. So only while you're sleeping is it going to measure your skin temperature to see if there are any fluctuations. This is almost like an early warning system to see if maybe you're coming down on something, especially if there's an elevated or a lowered skin temperature than usual. Usually it'll have you within a range that's normal. So you'll drop by 0.1, or maybe you'll go up 0.5, things like that. Now that's normal, but if you're going up like +3 or more, then maybe something's up. So it's one of those neat features that, again, gives you some interesting data, but not necessarily the context behind it. And as I'm going to explain later on, this is kind of one of the themes of the device unto itself. One of the other sensors that matters here is heart variability. So what's your heart rate like, but also what are some of the changes that are going on with it. So one of the things that I think is cool that Fitbit put in is that if your heart rate is unusually high or unusually low for no reason at all, it can give you an alert. I never saw that happen while I was using the device, so I don't actually know what it looks like or what it does when it does that, but it is in there. Now, that also applies to the SpO2 sensor, or the pulse oximeter, that is in here as well. The key to this, though, or at least the caveat to this, is that you have to use this with a specific clock face, which you can find in the clock face section in the Fitbit app. When you install this, you have to then have that clock face on before you go to bed, because this thing only works when you're actually sleeping. And then you'll get a reading, which, by the way, only shows up about 45 minutes to an hour after you've woken up. I know there's a lot going on, and it could have been a lot simpler the way it is on a Samsung or Apple smartwatch, but Fitbit went about it a little bit differently here. And again, the data that it comes with is supposed to be part of more empirical data. The thing is that when you see the number, you're not necessarily going to know what it means or what it's about. A doctor might know, but you may not necessarily know. So yet again, the sense is picking up data, it's learning things about you, but it's not necessarily telling you what it all means. Another sensor in here is an electrocardiogram. So an ECG is actually in the Sense. Very cool, right? But unfortunately not in Canada, because Health Canada has not approved this thing yet, so it is dormant for watches that are in Canada. And if you're thinking, hey, I'll just use a VPN and change my location to the US, I tried that and it didn't work. So if you found a workaround around that, fantastic. But by all means, make sure to comment on that. But I could not get it to work no matter how much I changed my location. It just seemed like it didn't work for some reason. So the ECG is there, you just can't use it in Canada, unfortunately. Another big addition here is GPS. So GPS has been in a Fitbit watch before, the Ionic in particular, but not in the Versa series. Well, the Versa 3 has it, but the previous ones didn't. So the Sense now has GPS, which is great. So if you're tracking exercise, you're outside, you're running, or you're going for a bike ride, whatever it is, anything that requires knowing distance, pace, things like that, having GPS is great. And it works really well, actually. It's very consistent, it's really nice, but it is a bit of a battery drain. I'm gonna get to battery life a little bit later, but it is one of probably the primary battery drainer out of all the features on the watch. Otherwise, Fitbit didn't actually dramatically change a whole lot about the way that it tracks exercises. It's a lot of what you would expect from a Fitbit device. It's pretty similar. And I didn't really have any issues as far as tracking goes. So the automatic tracking for certain exercises still applies. It kicks in after 10 minutes and it will reward you, like it will still track those 10 minutes that it wasn't active, so to speak, but it's still there and it works. So you have that, and all the other exercises that you can add also apply as well. So as far as a smartwatch for working out is concerned, there are not really major surprises here, and it does work pretty well. A couple other special features I want to touch on are Alexa and just voice assistants in general. So Alexa is back and you can use it right out of the box. It will not talk back to you despite the fact that there is a speaker on this watch, because the speaker is inactive. At least it was while I was testing it. Alexa didn't say anything to me. So while I could see what it was doing on screen, it wasn't actually saying anything. Okay, now Google Assistant will be added as another option for voice assistants at some later time. It wasn't active while I was testing this out, but it is going to be there. The speaker is interesting because it seems like Fitbit has plans for it as it relates to phone calls. So while I can actually respond to a phone call on my watch so that I can then answer on my phone or Bluetooth headphones, I can't actually talk to anybody through the watch. At least not yet. That is a feature that Fitbit says is coming, but as of now, as of this review, it was not available to me yet. Notifications are pretty good. With Android, you have a little bit more leeway in terms of responding to messages, but again, I'd like to see a little more. I think having, obviously, the ability to respond by voice would be amazing. So again, we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Alexa itself is okay. I don't think there's a major difference in the way that it was implemented in the Versa 2 compared to now. You can kind of just basically say the same things or ask the same things as you could before. There are certain things you couldn't do. So for example, you can't control music through Alexa or even request it through Alexa. I imagine the same will be true of Google Assistant as well. And speaking of music, I really wish Fitbit would just allow Spotify Premium members to be able to play music offline by just saving playlists. I mean, the watch, yes, it's 4 gigs on paper, but it's actually 2.5 gigs that are available of free space, and unfortunately you cannot fill it up with any of your offline playlists. You can if you're a Deezer subscriber though. If you subscribe to Deezer, no problem. You can put music on there and you can listen to it without the phone being involved. All right. Now, it'd be nice if the Spotify integration expanded the way it has with Samsung smartwatches, but so far you're only getting basically playback control and some selective control, but you can't actually play music natively from the watch. So unfortunately, that's one of the drawbacks. And generally with apps, it is very much a hit or miss type of a situation. So Philips Hue, for example, I had a really hard time getting that going on the watch. And in fact, I wasn't even successful getting it going. I followed all the instructions, but I could not control the lights from my watch. Starbucks is fine, Yelp, those apps seem to work pretty well. Uber seems to be okay, which kind of always was, I think, even going back to the Versa 2. So some apps will work, and then some, I don't know. If you're a runner, perhaps there are apps that you feel might work there too. I don't run, so I don't know. But in any case, there definitely will be apps you don't know or have never heard of, and there will be plenty of clock faces. So if you're looking to personalize the watch, the clock faces are definitely going to give you an opportunity to do that. So speaking of personalization, I think one thing that's really going to stand out here are the new bands or straps. So before with the Versa models, there was the mechanism to get the bands in there was not intuitive. People didn't like it, and so Fitbit listened and decided to change it completely to one of the easiest, actually, that I've ever seen. I mean, just changing a strap is very easy. It just clicks in and out, and that's it. Now, of course, that means that previous bands that you would have had for the Versa watches before will not be compatible with the Sense, nor even with the Versa 3 for that matter. So you'll have to get new ones for it, but again, there's going to be plenty coming from Fitbit, and there's a very steady aftermarket that deals in those too. One last thing, first about Fitbit Premium. So Fitbit Premium has some of the things that I'm talking about. So like, sleep quality, the stress management score. Some of these empirical data features that I kind of alluded to earlier are mostly behind the paywall of Premium. Not all, but some. And so Premium gets you, guided workouts. It gets you a lot of different features that kind of make sense. Like if you're willing to pay the $10 a month or $106 a year for it, it's not bad to have, especially these days, given the pandemic. So Fitbit Premium is kind of the same. They're expanding it with more content, and I'm sure that's going to continue. I mentioned battery life earlier. I just want to touch on that quickly. You're looking between 2 to 5 days, depending on if you have the always-on display on, how much GPS you're using, and generally how much you're using the watch for other features. So, music control, or Alexa, or just generally for tracking or whatever it is you're doing. But mainly the main drainers are GPS and I would say the always-on display. Those are the two things. If you're using those in abundance, I don't even know that you'll make it to 2 days. You might. But in any case, that's kind of the range that I found while I was using this for the last month, is that pretty much 2 or 5 days. If you're basically doing nothing with the watch but just looking at it, at the time, you'll go to 5 days, if not beyond. And that is my review of the Fitbit Sense. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.